Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome back. Access to Democracy. I could say finally has Jim McDonald, the Eagan police chief, here. And I say finally because he was scheduled twice several months ago and a few months before that. And emergencies cropped up at the last minute. And the last one where you couldn't appear was a house fire where several of your officers were in there, and actually they saved people, but also suffered smoke inhalation. You chose that over us and ended up in the hospital, but that officer was fine, I understand.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. It is good to be here, and you're remembering that action is correct. A few months ago, one of our officers was involved in a house fire and ran in to get a lady out, and was overcome with smoke and went down to Regions. And I'm happy to report that he's just fine.
And well, you've been here a half dozen times, and you've been chief now since 2006. So you run a really tight ship in a good department, probably the most educated department, or certainly as educated as any police department in the state, and comparable to any in the country. And I know quite a few of the officers personally, and I paid those tickets. But this is true.
Yeah. Alan, you are correct. Of the 69 officers that we have, I imagine 30 of them have undergraduate degrees and 20 have master's degrees, and very proud of that. And I like to believe that the demographics making up our department reflect the educational level of the citizens of Eagan.
And it also reflects not only your approach, but their approach to handling crime in a much more sophisticated manner. We even see in neighboring communities where the officers walk in with guns drawn and in some cases shoot first, unfortunately. Your people have much more, in my estimation, sophistication in handling these matters. And I know, for instance, a lot of the complaints that you get involve mental health issues. People who are either on drugs or people who have mental health problems, and your people really seem to handle it in a different way.
Well, let me talk a little bit more about the educational piece. We give our officers a lot of tools after they get here. We teach them to drive like race car drivers. We teach them to fight like tigers. We teach them to be like expert marksmen. And of all the tools that we give them and give them instruction on, I always remind them when the first day in the office, when they get their badges, the best tool that you have is what you come with, and that is your mouth. Because your mouth can get you in so much trouble, and it can get you out of so much trouble as well. And the education that our officers are bringing with them, or have when they walk in the door the first day, I think really allows them to interact more effectively with our citizens, which leads me then to your next point about the mental health issues that our officers are facing with the public. I started tracking mental health related calls back to 2007. At the time, the sum of those numbers were about 700 or so calls related to mental health. at the end of 2007. At the end of 2011, we had over 1,000, which relates to about a 38% increase between 2007 and 2011, and it's somewhat alarming. And I've been asked on a number of occasions is what is the basis for that, is what's my explanation for the increase in those sorts of calls. And I can only speak anecdotally, but I do believe the economy has a lot to do with our increase.
I would think so, because the pressures on people are tremendous. People losing jobs, people losing homes, families breaking up.
The war.
That's certainly, the war certainly is a big one.
Yep.
And we've seen what that has done to people and to the veterans returning home.
Yes, and when you take the loss of a job a step further, is what else do you lose when you lose your job but your health care. And I know of many instances where someone who's overdosed or is threatening suicide has commented that they feel like a failure because they had lost their job, and they're pawning items that are very dear to them or a loved one just to survive, and it generates a lot of depression. And
that ends up as a police call in many cases.
Well, we are the first line in that, and in some respects, you feel a little helpless, because what you do is you go there, you calm the situation down, and you rely on a service, either the county mental health or maybe the individual's health plan, a counselor that they might be dealing with, or a nonprofit to help manage this. And from speaking with my colleagues, I know they're seeing increases in mental health related calls as well, which kind of exasperates things, and you can kind of get a sense of how strapped that service area of our population, or the agency responsible for servicing that part of the population is, because they got to be strapped.
But at least your officers go in there with the mindset that we're going to try to help this person, not that we're going to take this person down.
Right.
And we were talking with Steve Francisco before we went on air, and he talked about several instances where he's had really good dealings with the Eagan Police Department and how responsive and responsible they are. You know of my situation a few years ago with Patrolman Hawkins, where my late dog, in fact I've just written a book about that dog that's probably going to be out in the fall, and ran away, and I drove into a field that hadn't been plowed in the middle of the winter, and promptly the dog was home. I was stuck there. And Hawkins came. Not only did he help me out, but he dug me out. And I mean, that was above and beyond really the call of duty. And I said, you don't have to do this. He said, at the end of my shift, I could use the exercise. I mean, that to me embodies the Eagan Police Department.
Well, thank you, Ellen. You have mentioned that before, and I'd like to think that, I believe it was Officer Curry.
Curry, was it?
Hugh Curry. I'd like to think that
well, maybe Hawkins is one of the ones who pulled me over.
Yes, I gave you a ticket. And he's the Burnsville chief.
And, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So he probably did pull you over. I'll have to share that with him. But anyway, I'd like to think that Officer Curry kind of embodies what the organization's all about. So.
Yeah, it was Hugh Curry, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. You get older and the memory starts to fall apart.
Tell me about it.
But that certainly is one issue. Another issue I know that you have is the fact that a lot of good officers are now retiring.
Yeah, that's going to be problematic. Let me kind of go back here to take you through a little history of the department. It grew by leaps and bounds as the population exploded in Eagan in the 80s. The police department needed to put on a lot of staff to keep pace and to serve the needs of the citizens. So there was a number of us that were hired in the mid to late 80s, and many of us now are approaching retiring age. And
that doesn't include you.
Not me, no. But I think in the next few years, 5 to 6 years, I would be eligible for retirement.
I have suits older than you, so.
Yeah. But anyway, those people hired in the 80s is really what I consider the backbone of the organization. And we were reborn we were born in the 80s. We will be reborn in the next 5 years, because we're going to have to start replacing those people that were hired early on, and out the door goes the experience that they've developed for 30 some years of law enforcement.
And the challenge, of course, is to get the same mindset in a new recruit, especially who's probably more anxious and more active, to get the mindset of the department, to follow through the philosophy of the department.
Alan, that's a very good point. And the challenge there, and I shouldn't say it's the challenge, but the way to help manage that is you put the new recruits in with the people that have been doing the job so well for so long, and that would convey and pass along those traits that you had mentioned earlier on in your show. We want those characteristics to rub off on the new officers. And I have to say this, there has not been any difficulty in locating recruits. The way the job market is right now, we just had 2 retirements, 2 long-time employees have retired. Linda Myrie, who's a sergeant, and Lori Tripp, who's an investigator, both had 32 years on. We advertised for those positions, and we've had over 200 applications, and the hiring rate is about 0.7% of getting selected to be an Eagan police officer.
And that speaks well also of Eagan as well. Now you say you have 69 officers, but the department itself is about 100?
We have 69 sworn staff, and we have non-support personnel as well, and that totals another 16, so we have 85.
And you have some detectives?
We have detectives. We have 14 people assigned to investigation. It includes our supervisors, and we have 3 officers assigned to the city schools, in the middle schools and the high school.
And of the 69 sworn, does that include the canines?
The 2 canine officers, it does, yes.
Well, what about the dogs?
Well, if you want to include the dogs, technically they do have a badge, so we have 71.
Okay.
And they work cheap. I mean, we don't have to give them a paycheck.
They work cheap, but they work very efficiently.
They do. They
Yeah.
do. In fact, I have to put a plug in for the community. Is we had 2 dogs that the last 2 dogs that we had suffered, one died of cancer, and one had a medical issue that we didn't have to put down, but we just had to retire. And the community came forward, and the Crime Prevention Association, through the generosity of many individuals in Eagan, funded those dogs. And both of those cost in the neighborhood of $15,000, total. So, and that's money that we did not have in our budget. So we could quickly do a turnaround and get the dogs back into service after we sent the officer and the dog through training.
And that's not something that happens overnight.
No.
Not only do these dogs have to be trained before you get them, but they have to be trained with the officer who is going to be in charge of them. And it's interesting how they can be part of the family, and they can just be as gentle as any animal, and yet when they have to do their job, they are incredible.
Yeah, and that is the mark of the handler. I always tell groups, especially when we're showing the dog, and the dog is available for public demonstrations, and I'm sure many of your viewers have seen our canine teams in action at public demos, and it's interesting how one moment you can be petting the dog, it's wanting to lick you and kiss you on the face, and the next minute it could bite you in the arm and look for drugs and those sorts of things, and it is a use of force multiplier for our officers. We could get in confrontations with some suspects who are willing to take on a human, but yet the dog shows up and it barks and growls, and the people give up.
It's interesting because I've just written a book about Toby, our dog who died last summer, and hopefully it's going to be out soon. And I was with a publisher yesterday, and the young woman saying she had a retriever, which Toby was a setter retriever, and the dog loved everyone. But she had a television repairman come to the house one day, and the dog growled at the guy. And she said, "Dog has never done that before." Anyway, to make a long story short, she went downstairs to the washing machine, and she turned around, and the television repairman was in her way, blocking the door. And she really got frightened and showed it. The dog growled, snarled, and went for the guy. And she said, "Get out of here." He did. She called the television company, and they called back a couple days later, and they're really sorry. He slipped through the hiring process. The man was a convicted rapist. There's a story of the dog sensing something and really, really saving that woman. And it's amazing how really accurate their senses are.
Yep. Many of the handlers will tell you that and rightly so, they're with their dog, and just like many homeowners, they're with their dog. They come to trust it, and you get to know the cues that it's giving, and they'll tell you that sometimes that they trust the dogs more than they will humans.
I can understand that. Actually, we're going to get our first dog park here in Eagan this summer, and I can't wait because we have a new rescue, a Springer, who is much too active for me, I have to tell you that. And I can't wait to get him in the park and let him run, which is what he really has to do.
There's a lot of people anticipating and looking forward to the new dog park.
And now, crime statistics. How are we doing here in Eagan?
Well, I'm happy to report our crime has been, our Part 1 crimes, our violent crimes, and even the non-violent, the Part 2 crimes, they're diminishing. Not without a hint of concern. I noticed that there's been an uptick in the number of burglaries that we've had. Our narcotics arrests and instances have increased slightly.
Again, economy.
Yep. And even though we've been managing less crime, our arrest numbers are up. And in 2011, if you compare that to 2010, we arrested almost 1,600 people. And that includes juveniles, but that's 4 arrests a day. So, we're managing less crime, but we still have those public purpose responsibilities, if you will. I mean, police departments deal more than with crime. We're dealing with those mental health issues, which is not characterized as a crime. Traffic enforcement, those sorts of things. And just to give your viewers some idea of how busy we are, we had 49,000 calls for service last year, which
49,000.
49,000, which is about 137 a day.
In a city of 64,000. Yes. So that really tells us something. Right.
And you know what? I would say, we have a population of 67,000, but you get large corporations, and it's a destination for workplace, and if I remember correctly, our population swells to about 100,000 during the day, during the work hours. So we work in a very busy environment.
I had occasion, I guess about 5 years ago, I knew my neighbors were on vacation. It was nighttime. I was out walking Toby at the time, and I saw an old car pull up, and then I saw 2 people get out. They went to the front door and they knocked, and of course I knew my neighbors were away. And then one of them went around to the back. So I called my cell phone 911, and we live in a cul-de-sac. I would say within half a minute to a minute, 3 cars were there. It happened that these people were trying to deliver something to my neighbors. Scared the hell out of them, but 3 cars were there. 1 blocked the cul-de-sac, so they couldn't escape in their car. The other 2 were right on the scene, and fortunately it was a non-issue. But I thought it was an issue, and that's one of, I guess, the many thousands of calls that you get. But you get some very serious ones too.
We do, Alan, and let me say this is I probably said this on your show before, but I think it's important for people to understand that the police are in the get bothered business, and I don't know how many residents I've spoken to that they see something as you had in what you just described, but they don't want to call the police because they don't want to bother them. And in the circumstance that you outlined is, I would much rather have our officers go and check that out and talk to those people and find out that it's nothing than the homeowner gets home, finds out that they've been burglarized, and then try to track down the suspects in the property much later on. And
Which has been fenced, which is long gone.
Right,
And
and it's much easier for us to explain to the people that are innocently there that, hey, we got a call and we're coming to check stuff out, and if you lived in this home, you'd want us to call too. So.
And the response time was incredible.
Yeah.
And that's really, I don't know how many cars we have on the street at any given moment, but boy, 3 of them were there so fast.
Yep. And when and I think they realize too, is when you hear that there's a possible burglary, which sounds like that's how that call would have been broadcast, that it gets the attention of the police officers, and they're going to get there in a hurry.
So, crime statistics, back to that. Calls are up, arrests are up, violent crimes up or down?
Well, I would say violent crime, for the most part, is down. And I should remind your viewers too that our yearly statistics are posted on the city website. You can get to them by through the city webpage. There's a police page, and we have an annual report that we publish. But by and large, violent crime is down. That's the murders, the aggravated assaults, the auto thefts.
Now, when we say murders, you put it in plural. In Eagan, we're kind of used to murders being singular over a period of a year.
Right, and I'm guessing we have 1 murder every other year in Eagan since I've been chief. Every other year, so I don't believe we had one in 2011. So
Domestic problems generally are at the foot of most murder situations, in my experience.
Let me put it to you this way: many victims of violent crime know the suspect, and this really speaks to women that are victimized by violent crime. It's going to be a partner or a good friend that they know, and my best advice is to choose wisely, because if you're going to be the victim of a violent crime, it's going to be someone that you know and perhaps love.
And it's funny because as you read the papers, so many people who have been victimized, or so many children who have been victimized by a partner, that partner has a long criminal record, and yet the person chose to live with and or associate with that partner. I for one, cannot understand that.
Yeah, and that's sometimes a cycle, a bad cycle that women find themselves in. Women that are victims of domestic violence and horrible domestic situations, is that it's hard to escape a situation that they've been abused, because sometimes they feel that they have no other choice but to stay with the abuser.
We also have had a coyote problem here of some degree. I called once and said, if I see one in the backyard, can I shoot it? And I believe it was Chief McDonald who said, absolutely not, you cannot fire a gun in the city limits. But we have had a couple cruise through our backyard, and it is a problem. I think more in the northwest portion of the city.
Yeah,
and what I think
we'll always have them, Alan. Even and I'm not recommending eradication by any stretch of the imagination. We in the environment that where Eagan is situated with the county parks, the Lebanon Hills, with Fort Snelling State Park, with some of the large tracts of parkland that are within the city, we will always have coyotes. I tell residents that the best course of action to protect themselves and their pets from coyote is through education. And you can find this stuff on our website. We've actually hosted seminars for the public to come and learn more about coyotes, and brought in nationally recognized speakers on the topic. In fact, I think it's been playing on local cable TV stations. But if we were to eradicate coyotes, I think it would give our residents a false sense of security, that because we managed to get rid of 2 or 3 of them, others would come in, and people. I don't want people to think that just because we got rid of 2 or 3 that it's safe to let your pet roam at night. Really, education is the key to confront coyotes.
Now, when I had the county attorney on here, Jim Backstrom, who's been on many times, I asked him about legalizing marijuana, and he almost went off the wall. He is convinced that marijuana leads to all sorts of serious crime, that it's the springboard to getting into serious drugs, which is against everything that I know from reading. Certainly, you see now 17 states have legalized medical marijuana. 12 more are about to do it. There's a movement afoot in New York City and in the state of New York to make small amounts of marijuana possession nothing more than spitting on the sidewalk. In your estimation, how big a problem is marijuana, and does it lead to more violent crime?
Alan, honestly, I don't have any information to suggest that marijuana use leads to more harsh drugs. I can't tell you that. I can tell you that marijuana, the officers that are out working the street and confronting the narcotics issue deal with marijuana probably more than any other drug. And small amounts of marijuana in Minnesota is a petty misdemeanor. I mean, if you have a small amount, if you're walking around with a joint or two, it's going to be a petty misdemeanor.
Wouldn't it even be better if it was a violation or not even a criminal?
Well, I'm not going to suggest that. And first of all, I'm not someone who always suggests that the sky is going to fall if something gets, like marijuana gets legalized. I would say that anytime your mind is altered, that it causes a problem for us. I mean, we deal so much, and I've always said this, if it wasn't for alcohol and drugs and how it alters the mind, I'd be out of a job. And the only hesitation that I would have about the legalization of marijuana is now, if someone's high, are they going to be more likely to be out driving? Are they going to be having that domestic with their wife? Or whatever the case is.
Or in the case of marijuana, are they just asleep?
Right. Or eating at the restaurant.
Yeah. No. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you here.
Are we done already?
We've gone through actually 29 minutes.
Wow, okay.
And there's actually more that I want to talk about, but we'll have to have you come back again, barring the unforeseen and emergencies, and pick up where we left off here. Eagan is a great city. It's a great city to live in. It's a great city because of its parks. It's a great city because of the greenery. It's a great city that's environmentally conscious. It's a great city for many reasons. We came here actually 16 years ago by accident, but I have never looked back. The quality of life is wonderful. And one of the reasons that it's a great city is because we have a police force that you head, that has the philosophy that you have espoused, and that really makes us all feel more secure in our homes, and that we have people out there who are understanding and protective. And I thank you, Jim McDonald, for that and for coming on here.
Thank you, Alan. It's always a
Thank you,
pleasure.
sir.